And in 1900, on St. Valentine's Day, a party of schoolgirls are supposed to have come here for a picnic. Some of them decided to break away from the main picnic party and climb and explore Hanging Rock. Some of them disappeared, some never to return.
Picnic at Hanging Rock occupies an interesting place in popular culture. In the 50-plus years since the novel's publication, it has in a way become an urban legend. It's a story we know is 100% fiction, but the possibility of what if it's true still tugs at the back of some people's minds. The 1967 novel by Joan Lindsay was adapted into a film in 1979, directed by Peter Weir, and tells the story of an ill-fated outing undertaken by a group of Australian girls enrolled at the exclusive Appleyard School. The school, run by the stern Miss Appleyard, rises like an oasis. At the Appleyard School, Miss Appleyard focuses on the education and grooming of refined and proper Victorian young ladies. These young girls, in a flush of excitement and anticipation, leave the school on the morning of Valentine's Day, 1900, and travel to the ancient geological formation of Hanging Rock for a picnic. Contrary to the girls' school, Hanging Rock rises out of the landscape like a primordial fortress. The outing is a chance for the girls to let their hair down and take their gloves off. It offers a day of freedom away from their regimented lives and a chance to abandon themselves in relatively untouched nature. Then, sometime during the day, all of the watches stop.
A lot of my watches and stopped.
Stopped at 12. Never stopped before.
Then 3 of the girls, despite the warnings from Miss Appleyard,
The rock itself is extremely dangerous. You are therefore forbidden any tomboy foolishness in the matter of exploration.
set off to climb the rock. Those girls, the popular and ethereal Miranda, the bright and scholarly Marion, and the wealthy and beautiful Irma, along with a fourth, Edith, tagging along at the last minute, go missing. The remainder of the story deals with the not-so-successful police investigation into the matter, the turmoil at the school in the aftermath of the disappearances, and the 2 young men who become entangled in the search. And the film is beautiful in its composition, its cinematography, and its evocative musical score. But the story is unsettling. The rock is unsettling, not only to the girls, but to the viewers, to the filmmakers, and even to the author. Hanging Rock's author, Joan Lindsay, was an interesting and eccentric woman, and she was also a little bit spooky. Born in 1896 in St. Kilda East, Victoria, it's said that it was not unusual for watches and clocks to stop whenever she was around, and she always flirted with the supernatural. She believed in ghosts, and she told people that she saw figures draped in black in the night. Lindsay tells the story that on a winter's morning in 1966, she sat down at her typewriter with the previous night's dream still on her mind. It was a dream of a picnic on a hot summer's day to Hanging Rock, a place she knew well from her childhood.
I think I was about 3 when I first saw it, and it made this extraordinary impression on me.
As a young girl, she'd picnicked with her family there, and she often told a vague story of an odd occurrence that happened to her when she was 3. She gave no details of this incident besides saying cryptically, "Something happened." With that dream on her mind, she began to write what became the novel Picnic at Hanging Rock. Okay, well, that's one version of the story. Because with Lindsay, stories and tales morph and mutate and adjust themselves to the time and the listener. Terrence O'Neill says in his book, Joan Lindsay, A Time for Everything, the origins of Picnic are actually very ordinary. The idea was sparked off by a brief article in a school magazine that Lindsay read when she was young, written by a Miss McCraw, describing a school photographic excursion she led to Hanging Rock. According to O'Neill, the story hung in the back of Lindsay's mind until the idea of a picnic and missing girls grew up around it. Perhaps there's a bit of truth in both these tales, but what anchors them together is the actual physical place of Hanging Rock. In 1973, film producer Patricia Lavelle and director Peter Weir met with Joan Lindsay, and they traveled out to Hanging Rock. Lavelle and Weir had initially planned to film elsewhere, but both were so in awe of the rock's natural beauty, feeling odd as they examined the site. But once they visited, they knew they could film nowhere else. They had to film on the rock. And it's the image of the rock that actually dominates the film. The jagged outcrop rising from a flat and open plain is the eroded remains of an extinct volcano. It's over 6 million years old, and over time the ice and wind have sculpted its dramatic pinnacles that stab up into the sky. The site, whose traditional name is Naganalong, was used for sacred ceremonies and initiations by the area's indigenous people, who were the rock's custodians. However, they avoided venturing to the rock's summit, which they believed to be inhabited by evil spirits. The site of Hanging Rock itself was a dividing point for 4 Aboriginal territories and the center of historically and culturally valuable indigenous land. With colonialization, by the mid-1800s, the site became a popular destination for outings and picnics, and the indigenous population, established tribes who'd lived in the area for more than 26,000 years, were forcibly resettled or killed off as diseases like smallpox ravaged their communities. Sadly, it seems that popular culture overtook the history of ancient culture, and the indigenous history of the rock was drowned out by a fictional story. Today, visitors climb to the top of the rock and they scream, "Miranda!" I rewatched the film a couple of times while researching for this video, and I realized just how much of the story is actually set on Hanging Rock. I'd mistakenly thought most scenes actually took place in the school, but most scenes play out on the rock. And the time spent there is transmitted to us as otherworldly and mysterious. Just like the girls, we are simultaneously enticed and scared by it. It's terrifying in its beauty. While it's not explicitly stated or even known what power the rock possesses, we know that there is some inexplicable energy there. Weir and cinematographer Russell Boyd film it looming over the girls, almost pulsating, and it feels as if the rock is watching.
Surprising number of human beings are without purpose.
I've always felt that this scene was the ancient rock actually speaking through the girls, but in contrast to the earthy browns, grays, and shades of green, the scenes in the school are all pastel, candy-colored, and overfilled with Victorian embellishments. Although the rock seems unsettling, it's been rooted in its place for millions of years. It's one of the most natural things in the environment. It's the school that's the actual intrusion on the landscape, and it should put us off with the order it tries to impose on the girls and on the land around it, with its imported greenery and peacocks. It's obviously the most unnatural thing. During the film, Irma is found, but we never know what happens to Miranda and Marion, and I'll even argue that the specifics of what happened to them isn't really very important anyway. When Irma is found, she has no memory of what happened. Edith, who comes screaming down the rock, couldn't remember anything either. What is important, however, is how the disappearance has a profound effect on those left behind. Several of the characters meet very tragic ends as they get caught up in the ripple effect of the chaos that the vanishings create. The film ends abruptly with the freeze frame on Miss Appleyard and a voiceover detailing her fate.
The body of Mrs. Arthur Appleyard was found at the base of Hanging Rock on Friday, the 27th of March, 1900.
Lindsay always felt bad for those who researched looking for details of the true story, but she was also often coy about whether or not aspects of the story of the missing girls were actually true. Spoiler, they're not. But without ever explaining it, she held tight to the story of her odd experience on that rock when she was 3 years old. So maybe out there on Hanging Rock, something peculiar really did happen.
And I saw this old lady, and I knew it had to be Joan Lindsay, coming across towards me. So I stopped and was kind of waiting and watching her. And she came up to me and she just threw her arms around me. And while she held me, she said in my ear, "Oh, Miranda, it's been so long."
There are 8 million stories in the cinema cities. This has been one.